Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the channel. So, a lot going on. So what happens when it gets so cold that everything freezes? The windmills, the electric cars, the oil pumps, the roads. What happens when it gets so cold that the very sources of energy that we use freeze? Energy blackouts. That's what happens. What happens when you're trapped in your home and you can't even get food delivered to your house? You can't even drive away to be with family in fear of sliding all over the road. You can't heat your home. You can't go anywhere. And if these kinds of conditions continue for weeks at a time, this becomes something that is very detrimental to people. You can actually die from this. And this is what's happening in 13 to 14 states across America. We are experiencing now a dark winter. Now, Bo Jiden spilt the beans when he warned about dark winter, which I believe is an operation. How could he have known this? This was the last debate, the last presidential debate, and he spilled the beans. And he warned about what I believe is an operation to bring patriots to their knees. You see, most Texans voted for the Don. They were deceived by the right-left paradigm, as are the people on the left. They believed that the Don had their best interests at heart, and now they are suffering. 4 million people in Texas have been without power for days. Texas, the energy capital, probably arguably of the world, second to the Mideast probably, but in America, most people would agree that Texas is it when it comes to energy. Nobody in their right mind would have ever thought that Texas could have ever had a problem with power. But here we are. The shining jewel of oil production in America is at the top. Now, how did this happen? Well, the first thing is it's important to know that all of this was predicted. We got our first glimpse of this in this film called I, Pet Goat 2, this animation that came out in 2012. And back then, they showed us this wintry landscape. Now, we had a wintry landscape back in 2012, 2013. It was the first time the term polar vortex was used. And that very same term, polar vortex, is being used right now to describe what is happening across America. This is unbelievable. So, this is it. This is iPet Go 2. We're going to play a few seconds of this so you can see what is happening here. There is the frozen oil rig, the last one standing. The oil comes to a halt because of the cold conditions, dripping in here. Now, we've done some videos actually showing you that this looks a lot like Mr. T's hair. We did some overlays. And you can see that when you zoom this out, you can almost make out a giant face here. But obviously this is spilled over into the Biden administration. And they're just as culpable for all this. Now, if we go back here, we see the flag being torn away. And we've covered this before, but I believe this is all about Texas. Let's watch this play out here. There is the single star the Lone Star State, the single star ripping away from the flag. And even back then in 2012, 2013, we told you that Texas would be the target of everything moving forward, and it certainly has. They want to break down the people on the right, blend them into the fold, and they have been under sustained attack ever since this animation came out in 2012, as the single lone star breaks away from the rest of the 50 stars, the 50 states. I can't think of any other state that would fit this description, but there it is right there, hiding in plain sight. Now, let me make sure we're connected. We'll keep going with this because there's much, much more. Appears as though we are. There's something else here in this animated film. Now, this film has been beaten to death, but there is something that did not get the airtime that it should have gotten, and that is the apple on the floor. Now, if you're not sitting down for this, you may want to, because this was one of the most cryptic and accurate foreshadowings of I, Pet Goat 2 that I could ever remember. And it was about what happened in Aurora. This is the apple on the floor. 25 days after this animation released, there was a vigil in Aurora at the courthouse after the mass event took place during the Batman movie. This was in 2012. Now let me show you the math behind this. Here is the 25 days. Some people argue that I, Pet Goat 2 came out on the 26th of June, but I have records showing it was the 25th, which is 88 days after the beginning of the year. And then the Aurora event happened on 7/20/2012, same year. 25 days later, show you the math on this. And here's the Aurora event here. As you can see, there are the dates. And now I want you to watch this. And again, you may be wanting to sit down for this. This is the rear of the courthouse. This is the vigil. And there you see the lotus flower. Let's do a side by side on this. Now I'm going to show you this. Do you see the twisting? The twisting seeds coming out. The twisting seeds coming out. The twisting seeds coming out. There's the center of the lotus. And, of course, it blooms into the lotus. And, of course, lotus is Kamala. And this was the most accurate foreshadowing I think I've ever seen in I, Pet Goat 2. Now, this was overshadowed by the mega channels at the time when all this went down. My channel was just a baby, 5,000 subscribers, if I can remember correctly. And they were hung up on the nobody died ritual, which got a lot of channels shut down, which brought in the mass censorship and also allowed these evil people to escape under the guise of the NDAA, which says that that kind of propaganda is okay. So if you're going to say that nobody died, well, then that basically means that these people get a free pass because the law is written that they can make up anything they want. So why are we giving them that free pass? Yes, people die, and they don't have any qualms about sacrifice. They want you to believe nobody died because then they get away with it, right? So there's the lotus right there. You can't make this up. And the spinning seeds. And we talked about all of that. But here is what's crazy. The people in the room, and we'd covered this. Let's take this back. Those 12 figures in the room actually matched up to the 12 victims. There were 12. And they had posted an obituary with the short story on each of the victims. And we matched those short stories, those short obituaries about each of the victims with the markings on each of these figures. And they matched up like a puzzle. Now, we're not going to belabor this point too much, but every single one of these has a specific set of markings or some kind of symbol that matched up with the obituaries that we were told. And look, I hold out the possibility that maybe these weren't real, but when you lead with that and you try to convince the world that that's the case, immediately you're going to be called crazy. There are a million other things that you can look at and expose instead of just blindly saying that you believe that nobody died, because that is what they want you to say, because then nobody will believe you. So let's keep going with this. Now, before we move on from this, remember, this animation came out 12 days before all this happened, and there were 12 victims. Now, back to this Ice Age thing. So, obviously, you see this snowy, wintry landscape as they pan out from the classroom in I Pet Goat 2. And you see the snow moving across. You see snow drifts. And looking back and remembering this time on this channel, many of you were subscribed to the channel back then. We assumed that there would be a mini ice age, and we did get a small cold snap for the 2012-2013. I think 2014 was a little warmer, but we have had these harsh winters over the past several years since this animated film came out. And now it appears that the polar vortex is back in 2021. And so far, there are 14 states that are now frozen solid across America. So, what does all this mean? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. Now, this is a dangerous time for people on the right, as the mainstream media is roasting them. And because of how they supported the Don's presidency, and they bought all the gear, and they were labeled with the red hats, and how everything ended at the Capitol. And the media is taking a no mercy approach as they continue to trigger and mock everything that is right-leaning in the media. And you got to ask yourself, will Bo Jiden come to Texas rescue? Well, he has declared a national emergency. But let's get into what that means, because it's not what you think either. So he declared a national emergency 2 days ago, which is probably about right for when a president should do something like this, knowing that this very cold weather is coming. So here's the problem. So far, he's politicizing this and saying that we need more wind and solar to shore up the power grid. This is now the rhetoric going on. Basically trying to say, I told you so. But I ask you this question. What good is a frozen solar panel? Or a frozen electric battery? Or a frozen wind turbine? It's as good as garbage. You guys, dark winter is here. The winter that will push and force us into the electric grid technocracy. Now, anybody who lives in a cold climate will tell you that heating oil is the only thing that doesn't really freeze in cold climates. In fact, the Northeast, that's mainly what they use to keep warm in the winter. Heating oil. Now, I don't understand the technology in detail, but it's been around for hundreds of years, and heating oil is what people use, and their heating does never go out. So why aren't we talking about that instead of more electricity, more frozen power lines? that have to deliver the electricity, right? That fall over in ice storms. Why aren't we talking about that? Meanwhile, millions of Texans are freezing right now. Their homes will probably dip into the 10s and 20 degrees. Now, it's fine if you're young and healthy, but if you're an older person, this could kill you. Why aren't they talking about heating oil? Because it's diametrically opposed to their agenda to control you with the 100% electric powered grid. You see, they like it when you're easily contained and controlled in your home, or you're at your knees, at their mercy. And right now, Biden has Texas on their knees, and Texas is pissed. Power outages fuel Texans' outrage, stir political leaders to ask how they came about. So, after House Speaker calls for hearings on why electricity grid lost so much power, Abbott makes topic an emergency item. Democrats hit Abbott for lack of planning. Let's read this article. Austin. A political backlash over Texas electricity blackouts erupted on Tuesday, with the leader of Texas House calling for hearings to review how and why the state's electric grid lost so much power and left millions shivering amid record cold temperatures. After Speaker Dade Phelan called for House hearings to look into what happened, Abbott announced he's adding the subject as an emergency item for lawmakers, which means they can move faster on it in this year's session. Later today, he announced he'll have a blackouts hearing on March 3rd. State officials, meanwhile, have offered no concrete timeline for when the more than 3 million customers without power across Texas will get it back. The state's electric grid operator said Tuesday it had restored power to about 400,000 households, but did not identify where. Blackouts began overnight Monday across Texas as demand for power surges amid freezing temperatures, and electricity generators went offline because of the extreme weather. While initially billed as rolling outages that would last between 45 minutes and a few hours, many Texans have been without electricity for more than a day. We're in straight up power outages. We have had a massive grid failure. ERCOT officials briefed state lawmakers Tuesday afternoon. They declined to project when power would come back. You should really start taking countermeasures if you haven't already to conserve whatever heat you have. Wow. This is crazy. Now, of course, the fact checkers are out because there are people that are making the leap and saying, as a matter of fact, that Beau Biden was responsible for this. And this is where we have to be wise. He probably was, but the minute you say that, they've got you. Because then they'll discredit you. And so we have to postulate, right? We have to look at all the evidence. Him mentioning it, how specific it was, how it was foreshadowed in iPad Code 2, with the lone oil rig frozen, the last one standing, the lone star pulled off the flag. This is how we get these people, with evidence that there's something afoot here. Now, things are getting really dangerous for Texans, as many people are literally trapped in their homes. And until this freeze is over, and we don't know how long it's going to last, this is it. People need power to stay warm. Seeing temperatures as low as 0 degrees in the south. How does that happen? Well, it's definitely a weather event. Now, here's a blog that somebody posted. Somebody sent this to me. Headlines with a voice. U.S. Central Power Grid collapses. Emergency declared. The power crisis in Texas has expanded to 13 states. More record lows are expected for Tuesday morning across Texas. Frigid air continues to pour into central U.S., overwhelming power grids, forcing operators to implement rolling blackouts. Now, many people are challenging the notion that a rolling blackout would be needed based on this cold weather, that this could be orchestrated, and I agree that that could be the case. But here they use the term polar vortex again. They hadn't used this since 2012 when iPet Goat 2 came out, and here they're using the same term. They're saying it has poured out some of the cold air ever into the central U.S. Wow. So I'll link all of this in the pinned comment for you guys to read up on some of these. Your February bill could be wow. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but interesting nonetheless. So what are the highlights? What are the headlines here? Southwest Power Pool ordered rolling blackouts in 14 states. Organization which manages the power grid from Texas to Dakotas calls it a last resort. 2.8 million people were left without power in Texas on Monday as temperatures plunged. A major power grid manager that operates in states from North Dakota to Texas has ordered rolling blackouts. Now, for people that live in the South, this is unheard of. It appears as though the cold weather is reaching down further and further into the South over the last 10 years. This is crazy. Here's all the states affected. Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Nebraska, and New Mexico. This was the first time it had ordered mass rolling blackouts, and it is doing so to prevent further uncontrolled power failures. So this is a first. Wow. And they are calling this a last resort. Now, everybody always talks about EMPs and all this. I believe all that was programming for stuff like this. This is the manufactured EMP. This is what they were talking about. Forcing the power off. Not some extraterrestrial event, which I believe is all programming. So, this is it. Dark winter. Unreal. Wait, what? That might be a little bit of a stretch. You can almost make out J and a B in there, can't you? Let's try something here. I don't think that's going to work. Anyway, you can check that out if you want. What else do we have here? So there it is, you guys. Dark winter. Wait, let's try this. Where'd it go? Okay. I'll be back in the chat in a minute, you guys. Open image in new tab. Let's rotate this. Weird. Oh, I know what to do. Now, this is speculation at this point. I'm not going to say that this is for sure, but you got to look at this stuff with different eyes, because Oftentimes, they like to hide things in places. Okay? Now, I'm not saying this is for sure, but there's something going on here. That's what I saw anyway. Can almost make out certain initials, but maybe not. So, let's go back in the chat. Thanks for showing up, everybody. We have entered dark winter. Now, right now, what the people in the South need and all across America are prayers. Because there are a lot of people suffering, and there are a lot of people very, very scared. Very scared. Because we don't know when the end of this is going to come, right? And so people are literally frozen and have not experienced this kind of cold weather before. And doors, they can't even open their car doors if your car is parked outside. I got a dose of this when I lived in Connecticut. How quickly ice can form, and you can't even open your car door. You literally have to go in and fill up jugs of hot water and pour them onto your door handle just to get the door open. This is real. And imagine someone didn't prepare for this, and they don't have food and supplies. You can't drive because it's icy everywhere. Most people don't have the ability to drive because they don't have four-wheel drive, or they're afraid of. They've never driven in those kinds of conditions before. So, very bizarre. So we need a lot of prayers right now. Just pray for people. Silently have a prayer for the people that are going through this right now. Now, the only places that aren't frozen solid right now are like California and Florida. Everything else is very, very cold. So, am I the only person that understands that wind turbines freeze and electric car batteries don't start in cold weather and power lines still get cold and fall down? I mean, why are we going to invest more into that technology instead of relying on the technology that doesn't or isn't susceptible to freezing? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm uninformed. But fill me in the chat here if you guys can, because I don't claim to know everything. Okay, someone couldn't get into their truck for 3 days. Wow. Some of you are down in Florida. Rubbing alcohol and dish soap works good to stop the freezing. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thanks. You don't always have to use hot water, right? Salt, anything like salt will lower things below freezing so that they'll melt. Good option there. Or soap, like you said. Start with praise before prayers. Absolutely. They were claiming something, prices coming back. Now, we had to postpone the show with Elias because with the Crapit Hole event, because he's got to talk to his attorney. He talked to his attorney, and they said that he should not come onto the show and talk about the details of what happened until he goes to court. And I completely respect and understand that. But basically, for those of you that don't know, Elias was at the event, the Crapit Hole event, and was raided by the FBI. They went into his house, took all of his self-defense mechanisms. They told him he'd get him back, but basically it scared the living you-know-what out of him, and he had no idea he'd done anything wrong. But the judge they basically released him without bail. So that's a good initial sign. But anytime the feds come after you like that, it's a very rattling situation. Okay? So, like I told you, and this supports everything that we've been saying to you, that this whole Crapit Hole event was a dragnet. It was a honey trap. It was set up to draw people over there and then take you down. And that's exactly what they're doing. And this has hit home for us because a person that we know personally has gone through this. I don't know why he was there. He lives in the area. I'm sure a lot of people that lived in the area were there to film the event, right? But if you went, you're probably caught up right now in the system. So prayers for him too, and hopefully we'll get him on here when it's safe to do so. So I want to give some shout outs. I see Wacky Whack, T Kerr, Dave. I saw Allie, Markman, EABC, Blue, Sonya, Ellie, or Eli, Chris, Ryan, Tina, Tammy, Mark. Thank you guys for showing up and being dedicated to getting down to the bottom of some of this stuff. Oh, Rebecca got power back today. Water grids failed down there too. Oh, wow. The water grid failed too. Wow. That's kind of scary. So hopefully things will start to warm up. Things will start to melt. But it's just very odd that Bo Jiden was already talking about all this. I think he spilled the beans. He knew something. And because he's slightly off, he just mumbled it out. He probably got slapped around for that one, I can imagine. So, love you too, Eli. All right. No water, no power. Man, that's not good. Now I'm slowly working on a project, and I'll maybe do a disclosure at some point. As you guys know, I was able to get a small piece of property out in Arkansas, and one day I want to move out there. So that's the goal. But it's slow going, obviously. But this experience made me understand that if you're going to have anything out there, that it has to be well insulated. Probably should have like a generator, right? And make sure you're self-sufficient and you're not dependent on the grid. So if you're doing any off-grid projects, you definitely want to make sure that you're prepared, okay? Because this is one prime example. Now, there was a big ice storm in Arkansas back in 2009, and it was legendary. It was so cold there that it froze trees solid, killed them in hours. And then the tree would die and just fall over onto cars, onto houses. Many of you will remember this ice storm in Arkansas way back when. Now here's what Arkansas looks like right now. This is a live camera, kind of close to where I will be one day. Let's pull this over here so you guys can see this. This is what Arkansas looks like right now. This is the White River. And it is covered in snow, and that looks cold, doesn't it? But look at that. Isn't that beautiful? This is a live camera. That's a lot of snow for Arkansas. Guess it's northern Arkansas, so that's... But look how beautiful that is. But they're getting it too. Dark winter. I think they might still have power. But, listen. Things are probably going to get colder before they get warmer. Everything the elite says, just consider it to be the opposite, right? They're talking about global warming, but really it's basically we're going to be in a giant ice box. So you got to be prepared for that. Make sure that you have timber on your property that you can burn as firewood to stay warm. Make sure you're well insulated. Make sure you have multiple sources of energy available to you. But see what happens when you live in the grid? You're at their mercy because you can't just have well, you can have a generator, I suppose. But like, you know what I'm saying? You have a false sense of security. And then when things like this happen, you realize how little power you have and how little prepared you were. So, William was in an ice storm for 2 weeks without power. Wow. Rocket stove. Now, some of you from Arkansas, do you remember that ice storm in 2009? Propane. Yeah, and you know, I was talking to some guys out there in Arkansas, and they were saying that propane, that the costs fluctuate, and you have to buy it when it's cheap. And if you don't, you could find yourself in a situation where you're paying almost as much as electricity for propane. Like if you run out before the season, and this is why you should have multiple power sources. And you should have your eye on it. And, you know, I was just going to go out there with a wood stove and do it on the cheap, you know. And Then I quickly realized, even being here this last time, it was like in the 20s and 30s. And I was like, this is cold. Like, a wood stove isn't going to do the trick. Like, you got to have some kind of backup. Okay, otherwise you're just going to freeze. So, stay away from trees, yes. Some of these images out of this ice storm are just surreal. Like, they show the limbs of the trees, and they're literally holding thousands of pounds of ice on their limbs, and they're tweaked over and bent. Let's take a look at some of those images. Now, Arkansas is having an ice storm right now, or were, and look at this. Let's look at images here. But it's nothing compared to the 2009 ice storm. Tools, size. Let's go look at some of these larger pictures here. I mean, whoa. Well, that was crazy. Wait, let's go back. Just to give you a real idea of how this works. So this is probably the best example of what happens in an ice storm. What happens is these trees load up with the ice, as do power lines, and they simply just fall over or bend over and snap right off. And if you've got any structures or cars or anything near them, this can cause tens of millions of dollars in damage over a large area. Here's an image here. Fell right on the car. Look at that. Ice storm. And it just kills trees all across everything. All those beautiful trees. So that's the story with that. All right. Frog in a pot. Now, in terms of power, apparently natural gas is like the cheapest. But as you see, a lot of that's getting shut down too with these freezes. Then after that comes propane. Then comes, I think, heating oil or something like that. And then electricity. Electricity is the last. And people talk about the electric grid, but the truth of the matter is they burn coal for a lot of these electric plants. So that's not really clean energy. Natural gas is the cleanest energy. It burns very clean. And as does propane. Propane's a little bit more expensive, but cheaper than electricity. But I have a feeling that all might change as the legislation starts to get behind and push and subsidize the electric grid. What that will do is make the prices of natural gas and all that stuff be more expensive. They want all of that to be the same cost as electricity so that you just opt for electricity instead so that they can control you. That's how all this works. And they can just turn off parts of the grid if they feel it's a threat or whatever. So this is why they're starting to do away with allowing people to burn their own fires in their fireplace. This is what's happening in California. Never thought I'd see the day where you couldn't light a fire. But they say it's because of pollution, which is hogwash. I mean, how many people burnt fires, Native Americans to stay warm? They can say, oh, there were a lot less people back then. Well, the fact of the matter is you should always have the right to build a fire and stay warm. That's a right. No one should tell you you can't, it's a no burn day in your own fireplace. No one should tell you that you can't build a new building without a fireplace in it. Yet that's what's happening in California. No new construction has fireplaces. That's just crazy. So, okay, I'm back in the chat. Oil is the best heat for your house, not dangerous. Thanks for confirming what I thought I knew. Yes, they do. They say do as we say, not as we do. So they can burn all the fireplaces and fly on their jets and burn all the fossil fuels they want, but they want us all living under their tyranny. That's the problem. All right. We'll be back here tomorrow. Love each and every one of you. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for all the new subscribers. We're on here every single day if you're new to the channel, so don't wait for a notification. Just show up at about 5:30 a.m. Pacific Coast time, which is 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I love to have each and every one of you. You guys are amazing. We all work together on this channel. Most of what you see here comes from other people sending me information, and this is what we put the shows together with. And I will pin all of these in the comments after the show. Have a great day, everybody, and pray for those that are cold across the U.S. Pray that this helps to awaken them to the lies and deception and mechanism of control when we believe in the right-left paradigm. Take care and be safe, everybody, and be saved if you